F word is about to come up. You want to get into fraud.
Yeah.
And that's a little touchy if you're me in this industry. So I got to try to walk a tightrope.
Michael Arthur Griggs, age 58, just got sentenced a couple years ago to 50 months in federal prison for conspiracy and mail fraud. I believe what the guy was doing is marking up asbestos bills with overhead and profit, but the asbestos bills also were marked up by the asbestos contractor. I actually sympathize with him as a restorer because you got to do what you got to do. I guess the moral of the story for listeners out there is, this multi-invoice thing kind of gets really hairy. Although we hear you, there's a problem in the industry, right? And it might feel like a little shortcut in the short run, and you might actually see that it works with the insurance company and get money, but it could turn around real quick, and 5 years of prison is not pretty.
But you're really putting restorers in a place where they almost have to commit fraud just to stay in business. I don't think carriers understand that. And now finally, there's the industry coming together. My heart goes out to him and his other stakeholder there, just an employee, Chip. He ended up going down for 36 months too. So it wasn't just the founder. They 60 counts and 15 of them stuck.
How do we solve this problem? Because at the end of the day, right, our viewers now are going to say, all right, screw this. We're not going to do recon work anymore. And that's not good for the carrier, if the restorers just pull out, right? Because we can't do it this way. How do we solve this problem to where it's a win-win? We're not committing fraud and we're also making money. So we got to make money.
This poor DRI folks that ended up in jail, do you think these guys were getting rich? I think they were doing that because they were trying to eat and make payroll. If you actually look at the books, I'm fairly confident that a guy spent several years in jail for trying to make payroll. That's heartbreaking. What the hell's wrong with this industry? We have to wake up to the fact that making a fair and reasonable profit is not criminal.
So solution time.
Maybe Albi could help provide access to credit for policyholders, let's say, to finance large deductibles or pay things straight away. I think that it might be incumbent on Albi to think about how we can bridge financing, not even necessarily to our restorer at times, but even the policyholder.
1,000%.
And is that something you guys are thinking about?
Yeah. It definitely is. Welcome, everybody, to the Albi After Hours podcast, where we talk about propelling the restoration industry forward. I'm your host, Alex Duda, and today I'm super excited to bring back to the podcast the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Whatley. What's up, man? How's it going?
It's going great, man. I'm pumped up, but I know you're about to get into some hairy stuff. The F word is about to come up.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
Well, given our prelude to the conversation, you want to get into fraud. And that's a little touchy if you're me in this industry. So I got to try to walk a tightrope here.
But you're comfortable, right? Because I know you have carrier relationships and stuff like that. You're we're gonna dive in, right? And it is gonna be juicy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm uncomfortable, but I think waking up and being 40 years old and pursuing comfort is probably a huge mistake. Yeah, I'm uncomfortable, dude, but I'm around to get cracking.
All right, let's do this. So check this out. The owner and operator of Disaster Restoration, Inc., Michael Arthur Griggs, age 58, just got sentenced a couple years ago to 50 months in federal prison for conspiracy and mail fraud, and had a $500,000 fine and another $500,000 restitution and all kinds of crazy stuff. I believe what the guy was doing is marking up asbestos bills with overhead and profit, but the asbestos bills also were marked up by the asbestos contractor. Is that your take on the story, or what exactly happened?
Not exactly.
What was he doing?
That has a kernel of truth.
Okay.
And I certainly don't think it's constrained to just asbestos contractors.
Cool. So what was he doing?
Well, they leveled 60 counts against him, but I don't think we can get into what he did or what charges they leveled against him until we get to how the hell we got here and why was he doing that.
Okay, so where did we get and why was he doing that?
Well, when I started in this industry 14 years ago, I can recall vividly working in Xactimate, getting a subcontractor bid from say my drywaller, and say it was a $10,000 sub bid. I'm a prime contractor. I get that sub bid. I was adding 20% at the line item level.
Yep.
So I would do calc times 1.2.
Correct.
I had 20% there.
So that's whatever, 11,200.
No, it'd be 12,000.
12,000.
So then I would also apply my O&P. This is a repair estimate. O&P wasn't contested 14 years ago, right? You could get it for roofing unencumbered, contents unencumbered. Occasionally in mitigation, there'd be debates about it 14 years ago. Something interesting to know is O&P was paid out on everything, whether it was mitigation, whether it was repair, whether it was roofing, whether it was contents work. That's where we all started. And then over the years, that started paring down, right, to nowadays. For a repair bill of 30 grand, you're fighting for that, right? That's bizarre in and of itself.
Tooth and nail, yeah.
But anyhow, my recollection of adding that 20% line item level, I would still realize the 10 and 10 at the end of the estimate. Yep. So what you would have is essentially a 40% markup, 30% margin. My fixed costs were about 31%. Yep. We were running pretty lean. I've seen a lot of restorers with fixed cost in excess of that, but 31, it was enough. It was enough money where we were hiring subs, within an Xactimate is probably suboptimal. I would always advise my estimators to try to estimate it out in Exact. But ultimately, to the extent that you need to include a bid item, as long as you got that 40% markup, 30% margin, it worked.
Exactly.
What happened, and I suspect is why DRI, Disaster Restoration Incorporated, right, the Michael shop out of Denver, Colorado, started having this 2 invoice problem, okay? And so he would say, hey, drywaller, why don't you send that over to me at 12 Gs, okay, straight away. And then he would go fight for his O&P on top of it. So mathematically, as it relates to the severity of the indemnity to the carriers, pretty unchanged from historically where we had been. But there was just this odd pressure that happened 10 years ago, Alex, where you could no longer mark up a subcontractor at the line item level. So he was just manufacturing that, in my estimation. I never talked to the guy, don't know the guy. But he's just speculating.
1,000%.
Okay.
Well, but the thing is, if we look at the current state, it's impossible for you to operate a business at just 20% markup. I mean, if you're marking things up by 20%, that's 15% margin. Your customer acquisition cost is 10%. What are you left with? Right. So I get it. He got in trouble and, shit hit the fan, but I don't want to sit here and basically be mean to him because I empathize with him. I actually sympathize with him as a restorer because you got to do what you got to do. I guess the moral of the story for the listeners out there is, this multi-invoice thing kind of gets really hairy. Although we hear you, there's a problem in the industry, right? Don't go and get a $10,000 bill from that subcontractor and have a separate, $7,000 invoice and then go mark up that $10,000 invoice by O&P. And it might feel like a little shortcut in the short run, and you might actually see that it works with the insurance company and get money, but it could turn around real quick, and 5 years of prison is not pretty. I don't know about you, but I don't really like prison.
No thanks. He did go to federal prison, so I hear that's a little bit better.
It's better?
Yeah, I think federal prison is better than state prison.
Is that where crooked politicians go?
Yeah, they go to federal prison. The Bernie Madoffs and stuff, they end up in the federal prisons. I hear they're better, right? But now we're discussing the merits of various prisons. I think it's important to clarify what exactly he was doing. So that $12,000 invoice, if he's submitting that to carrier and he paid the $12,000 invoice to drywall, we're fine.
Yep.
But he was asking for a separate invoice to come over from that same drywaller of 10 grand. So he's paying the 10 grand. The carrier's realizing $14,000 in cost. Yep. It even says in the lawsuit that he was only marking up 10 and sometimes 20 and sometimes 30%. These weren't fantastic markups. I think he was just trying to get back to where, it was when I started in this industry. And my heart goes out to him and, his other stakeholder there, just an employee Chip. He ended up going down for 36 months too. So it wasn't just the founder. Yeah. 60 counts and 15 of them stuck. Wow. So mail fraud, as soon as you're dealing with checks in the mail, right? That's how they get you. So just something to keep in mind that if you've got 2 invoices floating around and you're a restorer, you're going at material risk. It's very real. And now there's legal precedent for it.
Wow.
So it makes it just easier for an attorney general to pick it up and go, okay.
So
I can levy these charges and I know they're going to stick.
How do we solve this problem? Because at the end of the day, right, our viewers now are going to say, all right, screw this. We're not going to do recon work anymore. And that's not good for the carrier, if the restorers just pull out, right? Because we can't do it this way.
Yeah.
How do we solve this problem to where it's a win-win? We're not committing fraud and we're also making money. So we got to make money.
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do, and this is a huge lift, and it's unfortunate we have to do this as restorers, but the truth is that we need to educate the carrier side of the house about the unintended consequences of their actions. I don't think when they were trying to constrain a restorer's ability to add margin at the line item level, that they contemplated the fact that the fixed cost for your average restorer is 30 to 40%. This is what I mean by fixed cost, guys, is like keeping the lights on, your rent at your office, your administration staff. If you never deployed your crew to a job that whole month, what are the costs that company would have to recognize, right? All your software as a service, right? Your Albiware subscription. You are fixed cost, my man.
Of course.
And I've never seen a restore at 20%.
Yeah.
So if you, straight away, if your cost for your fixed cost are in excess of what your markup is on a bid, for sure you're just going in the rears. As a restorer, you have huge cost. Think of the warranty risk that we go at risk as a general contractor when we are installing, a refrigerator, or you're installing an oven and that thing fails. Like ultimately the prime contractor is on the hook for that. And I think that the carrier side of the house doesn't know. So how would this be expressed besides the ethereal? I think Mark Springer was recently appointed to the RIA as the carrier advocate. And so he is developing a consortium and appointing carrier executives to meet twice a year, 3 times a year around a wooden table with some of the most powerful restorers in the nation. The Mark Davises of Puro Clean, the Jeff Moores, and getting those folks to the table where they can educate the carrier about, hey, we know where you're coming from. We get you're trying to constrain indemnity, but you're really putting restorers in a place where they almost have to commit fraud just to stay in business. I don't think carriers understand that. And now finally, there's the industry coming together, right, to communicate these systemic issues to the carrier. Did you see that when you started out in the industry? Was there that centralized voice?
No. And even now, I think it's, I mean, I know I'm not going to be Mr. Popular here with the statement, but I think it's a very weak voice. You really think about it, like, and I respect the movements of the RA and such, and I obviously love what Jeff Moore and everyone's doing, but like, it's a small percentage of restorers that are actually banding together. The market is huge. I mean, we can't, for whatever reason, it's hard to get restorers together. That's why I think if you're listening to this video, like joining the movements like the RIA and, having your voice heard is very important. And a lot of people, I don't know, it mind boggles me why they don't do that.
Springer wrote in, I think, circa 2017, that white paper, like fragmented no more. Such a lovely notion. And I think we have made strides. But
it's still
honestly, dude, it's still fragmented. They're all over the place. And
20 to 100,000 restorers out there. Your largest events probably have hundreds of restorers at them, right? Thousands of attendee, like 1,000 to 2,000 is your largest band of events, I would say.
I think I know why, or at least I have a theory.
What's your theory? I mean, we're sitting here in Scottsdale, kind of restoration mastermind. That was also very tough to put together.
It was, and tough to get folks out for, right?
Yeah.
That's my point. You and I have reached a level in this industry where we're afforded the time to think. Both of us are incredibly busy, but we have the ability to step back and breathe. It's how you outline in your latest publication. When you're on that roller coaster, you're just waking up and you're consumed with that next phone call. One, or you're not getting that phone call. You're not getting that job, right? And you're just a slave to that. Or it's that 2 a.m. call where we've all gotten out of bed to go sling some DUs and air movers, do whatever it takes. When you're operating with that kind of intensity, I think that it's difficult for you to step back, have the time to deploy, to even knowing what the problems are, knowing how to contribute to that conversation, knowing how to participate on a board of the RIA or AGA. You and I work with folks that are doing $10 million plus a year. You think that they would be in a place where they can get out to a mastermind unencumbered. This is next to impossible for probably 70% of the industry.
1,000%. The other thing is there's like, I don't know if restorers do the best with delayed gratification, right? Especially the nature of the business, but these problems fundamentally take forever and a lot of time, energy, and effort over a long period of time until you could see change. I mean, I remember there was a public adjuster law within the state of Illinois that basically took away consumer rights. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but we banded together as a group of public adjusters within the state of Illinois, and we did some lobbying and such. And, State Farm had cut this giant check to, this House of Representatives person, and he was voting pro the bill without even knowing what the bill was. And we had to go out, knock on doors, build relationships, such. Eventually that bill kind of got overturned, which was awesome. But it takes a lot of time, energy, and effort to educate stakeholders at a high level. So,
it does, but I think that it's really imperative that we do that
1,000%.
As restorers.
Yeah.
It's very bizarre. I think that if you have any industry, you're Dunder Mifflin, you're making paper and you're doing over $10 million a year top line, like you're participating in some paper related industry group. Like, exactly. I think that that's probably systemic in almost every industry. In our industry, not so much. So I'm not here to make a case for Springer or the RIA.
Of course.
I just think it's important that restorers understand that if you want to participate in this market, this is why industry trade groups exist.
Exactly.
And if you want to preserve your ability to make a fair and reasonable living, then 100%. You may have to look up for a moment.
Yeah. And it's not that big of a lift. I mean, 3 to 4 trips a year, and they could be cool trips. Like you go to Orlando or Scottsdale or wherever the shows are, right?
Yeah.
Take the family out with and such. But okay, so one way we could fix it is making the carriers more aware, and there's, the RA efforts and such. What are the other ways that maybe we could kind of tackle this problem?
My viewpoint, is probably obscure, but maybe it will create space for some empathy from the restoration side of the house. Mm-hmm. If you look at the combined ratios, how profitable carriers are and have been over the last 10 years, it's been really poor. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons is you've got bills in place like Insurance Bill 103, 1988 legislation in California, which precludes carriers from being able to adjust premium, take rate, without petitioning the insurance commissioner first. And what was happening, and still happening to some extent, is carriers were going and petitioning for a increase of, say, 20% in California. And the insurance commissioner was taking 24 months to render a decision. There's an outside consumer watchdog group that's got to get involved. The State Farm's got to pay $1 million to them to have them review it. And then Ricardo Laura, the insurance commissioner, comes back and says, 2 years, 30 months later, you can raise it 12%, not 20. So you don't get what you want or what you thought you needed. When you're in a hyperinflationary environment and construction costs are going up 11% year over year, like they did in COVID, post-COVID,
1,000%.
Whatever you were petitioning for is overcome by events by the time that judgment is issued. This is why that so many of the national carriers have pulled out of California. There's no competition. Nobody's writing business. And everybody's stuck with the insurer of last resort, which is California Fair Plan. And the name, it's a lovely name, but its outcome isn't exactly fair. You end up paying a lot more for a lot less coverage. If that carrier is not interested in totally making the policyholder whole, what's going to happen? What are you going to do? Go with Mercury? You wish you were with Mercury, right? You're stuck. So what I think needs to happen is we need to understand that the bureaucracy that's in place around the insurance carriers, same thing happening in Florida, similar law to 103. That's constraining the free market dynamics that create space for a healthy property insurance ecosystem. If carriers aren't collecting adequate premiums, it just means there's not enough money in the system. And I think policyholders have enjoyed artificially suppressed premiums for the last 30 years. The consequence of that is the margins for the carriers have been constrained and the restorer is downstream. That's what you and I remember. Like with Romex Terra, when you and I were starting in this business, cutting our teeth, we just submitted an invoice and was just generally paid.
Like unless you did the adjuster come and write a check on
right there on spot. I remember State Farm. Hey, what's up? Scott Black, give him some nucks. You had a relationship. Here's my estimate.
Exactly.
No glaring overages. Paid. Right? That doesn't exist anymore.
But why is this our problem? Like what I kind of get frustrated with, it's like I don't see policyholders banding together and having their voices heard to the insurance companies. Like, you know what I mean? It almost feels like it's restorer and carrier. Restorer's margins are getting squeezed. Carriers can't do this stuff, and somebody has to eat it. And it's this fight of who gets to eat it. Does the carrier swallow the frog, or does the contractor swallow the frog? I mean, consumers are, why should they not incur something if the system's broken?
Well, one of the things is restorers aren't great salespeople.
Exactly.
And I think that they put themselves at a disadvantage from the outset.
Move this. Okay, so that's the reason why. But ethically and morally, do you think like the consumer should have some sort of skin in this game, or should it just be I'm gonna just take the back seat, let the carrier and the contractor figure it out? Because I mean, status quo is that, right? We come in, sign a work authorization.
This is simple. The whole industry's so damn broken, Alex. Okay, here's what's going on, man. An HO3 is the most common ISO policy throughout the United States. That language, and this also shows up in DP6s and so on, that this language where it exists to indemnify the policyholder of incurred cost. This is an age-old concept where when that policy was originally written by ISO, which is the nonprofit formed in 1978, that eventually in 95 became a for-profit, and then in 2006 a holding company was formed, which is called Verisk, and that Verisk then a year later acquired a company probably a lot of your audience knows well, Exactware, and Exactware sells a product that you and I are both trainers for, Xactimate, right? So ultimately those ISO policies were designed for a restorer to have a relationship, a contractual relationship, and a monetary relationship. A good and valuable consideration is exchanged, and that policyholder is vetting that contractor for the cost and their performance, and they just pay that darn bill. When that bill is paid, that bill as a receipt is run over to the carrier, and the carrier incurs the cost or reimburses the policyholder. What's you and I's advice? Like one of our friends, if we know they've got some resources, they say, Alex, Whatley, what do we do? Like, I'm always like, just find a contractor you want to work with, pay them directly, right? Do your damn thing, and then just submit receipts. That's how the industry works. When we come into a loss as a restorer and we do silly things like, oh, well, don't worry about your deductible now, whatever that means. And they say, yeah, we'll get in here. We'll start drying this thing out, right? Just sign here. The insurance company will take care of everything. We're already putting ourselves and the policyholder at a huge disadvantage. Their greatest leverage is the policy language, right? I mean, that's what really matters. I mean, carriers can have all the guidelines they want. We don't pay for heavy blankets, whatever the hell that means. But that's not written in the policy. What's written in the policy is indemnify of incurred cost. So if we could get back to a situation where policyholders have more skin in the game, that would be great. Why did we end up here? I think it's a free money environment. I think people, when they wanted to go buy they wanted to buy a Corvette in 1969, like they had to save money because like you couldn't even get an auto loan. To the extent you could, it was like 28% interest. Okay. Now we're in a free money environment. We're not even incentivized to save. We're incentivized to go and invest all of our money. Maybe there's some good in that. But the consequence is nobody has $95,000 just sitting in cash waiting to pay the restorer.
But that's the thing. But everybody, the consumers have the purchasing power. The average American can go buy a $10,000 vehicle. So when their house floods, with or without insurance, they do have the purchasing power to go and buy $10,000 worth of restoration work, which is the average restoration job. Now, do they have it liquid sitting in their bank account? No. No, but you see that all the time. Like plumbers come in, like, for example, like when a plumber comes in and like I was always shocked, like they'll come in and do, let's say a collapsed drain, right? That causes sewer backup. They'll sell a $15,000 to $20,000 job like that. And then I'm sitting here, they're not billing insurance. They're not doing all that stuff. It may or may not be covered. The digging's typically covered. The actual fixing of the pipe isn't. They separate it, whatever. But they don't sit there and say, hey, yeah, we'll just bill your insurance company and sign this work auth or whatever. They say, no, $20,000, sign here, pay me, I'll dig, I'll take care of it. And then you figure it out kind of thing.
About those plumbers, I think that's interesting to bring up, like, and contextualize that against your average restorer. I think one of the problems with the published price list is just the administrative burden that is getting placed on restorers to justify their work. And carriers are probably doing that, again, like an unintended consequence. If carriers have such draconian obligations that they're placing on the restorer, to send them 900 photos or perform a Matterport scan, and they're not going to reimburse you for that. It's like you have to prove it, but we're not going to reimburse you for it, right? We're not going to pay for the TruePlan digital asset, but the sketch has to be perfect and within 1 inch. This is what's so bizarre. Like, I don't understand how carriers don't understand. The more administration you put on a restore, psychrometric charts and filling that out, what a go rodeo that is, okay? That's a whole rabbit hole. That has cost. Alex, that has real cost. Well, this has happened to me even at Emergency Packout Co. I think we were running more efficiently 8 years ago because I feel like for every field person, maybe for 10 field person, I needed 1 administrative staff to like support that, get that invoice through with the carrier, collaborate. Now, I think that we're running like a 5-to-1 ratio. It wasn't because we got worse at what we're doing. I mean, hell, a nonprofit I founded 13 years ago has been paid to fly around and help restore, centralize their estimating by leveraging geospatial data. That's what I'm known for. I didn't not apply that in my own shop.
100%. But
the carriers just keep loading all this burden on a restorer and then wondering why, like, they cheat. And, this poor DRI folks that ended up in jail, like, I think do you think these guys were getting rich? I think they were doing that because they were trying to eat and make payroll. Like, if you actually look at the books, I'm fairly confident that a guy spent several years in jail for trying to make payroll. Yeah. That's heartbreaking. What the hell's wrong with this industry? We have to wake up to the fact that making a fair and reasonable profit is not criminal.
So solution time.
Maybe Albi could help provide access to credit for policyholders, let's say, to finance large deductibles or pay things straight away. I think that it might be incumbent on Albi to think about how we can bridge financing, not even necessarily to our restorer at times, but even the policyholder.
1,000%.
And is that something you guys are thinking about?
Yeah. It definitely is.
You said solution time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a modular step-by-step process. So like the first thing that we did is we launched Albi Pay, but it's give the restorer the ability to collect that deductible, de-risk their mitigation job, right? And once that deductible is collected, once you are actually put in a position where you're actually selling a homeowner, not just selling them on a pipe dream of a work auth, but money changes hands, right? I think that puts some skin in the game from the homeowner. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is, like, how can we empower the homeowner to incur that cost truly? And yes, I do think that would be accomplished through a consumer-based financing. And I think it could be a win-win for the homeowner. Like, imagine if you could do 0% for 24 months. And let's just say it's a $15,000 check. It's like, you as a homeowner might have some financial needs, right? You do the work with me, it's $15,000. Now the payment happens instantly for me as the restoration contractor, right? You incur a $300 or $500 a month payment. Now the check comes from the insurance company to you, and now you got $15,000 liquid, right? You're paying for it that way. And you could use that as a tool of, hey, woe is me, I had this house fire, but I have this debt, this credit card debt that's at 27%. And you bring that value to the homeowner that way.
That's interesting.
Right? So, I mean, it's a win-win-win. Contractor gets paid right away. Homeowner wins. Obviously, the contractor would have some sort of percentage point that they would have to pay for that. Right. But I mean, the contractor's already paying percentage points, waiting 90 to 120 to 160 days to get paid. So it's like the contractor will happily pay 3 to 5%, let's say a merchant fee, to get paid now. The homeowner will happily take a 0% loan because why not, right? Now it's an incurred cost. We go justify it. There's no more fight. Insurance company pays the homeowner, and so on and so forth. And I think like that's a way we could really win and provide a value to all parts of the ecosystem. I also think, like, again, with deductibles, I think the insurance industry, we talked about it last time, could either go both two ways, right? We turn into this giant HMO, but like if the industry itself can't band together, who thinks that like the carriers are going to be able to band it together? Like, I don't think that's going to be possible. So I think the opposite side is carriers need to make money. Well, the logical way is raise deductibles, lower coverage, right? And you're starting to see that more, especially in the roofing space, like ACV policies on roofs, stuff like that, making people replace their roofs before non-renewals and yada, yada, yada. So now as more burden shifts to the consumer, we can come in and provide financial facilities to help that burden not be that bad to the consumer. And check this out, right? Let's say deductibles were to go up, right, by XYZ, right? And you did have a loss once every 10 years, and now you incurred a $400.
What is the number? Are you imagining, like, just let's talk about residential. 10,000, 20,000.
I mean, imagine this. Imagine if we could raise deductibles to a point where it's meaningfully impactful for the insurance carriers. Let's say
I think
10
20,
to 20.
Yeah,
20,000.
That matters.
Right? Great. Now, as a homeowner, I have $20,000 incurred. Woe is me, right? Like once every 10 years, I might get $20,000 worth of loss. But now if this facility exists where I can finance that at 0% and my monthly payment's $300 a month, but I'm saving on premium because my premiums aren't going up. You see what I'm saying? It could almost have a net zero impact.
You know who would be really like well equipped to finance it? I love your idea, especially when you worked in like, well, you've got credit card debt of 27%. Like you're adding value on value on value.
Yeah.
But I do think that carriers are in a unique position to extend
100%.
Credit for those large deductibles as
1,000%.
well. And then it would just add on to their premium.
Exactly.
So on. That would work. I love the idea of restores collecting a deductible. And it seems like where your heart resides in this conversation. You have to remember that there's still like, I'll speak intelligently about California, my market. California State License Board is only going to let a restorer take $1,000 or 10% of a job, whatever's less.
That's fine at
So,
up front.
at the
But
outset.
when the equipment's there, or when you pick
So
up
2
the
days
equipment,
later, as long as they perform the work.
But the problem in our industry is the restorer they know that Susie Jones has a deductible of $2,000 to $10,000, right? Because they're a pretty penny now, right? And they're not collecting that currently until the insurance check comes to Susie Jones,
Right.
Because we're afraid to ask Susie Jones for that money because we're bad salespeople as restorers. So we need to be empowered, just because Susie Jones, the average homeowner, has the purchasing power to do so. So if we're properly empowered to, one, be good salespeople, two, have the financial resources, like I'm talking about a fintech ecosystem to be provided to the restorers, right? It could be a win-win-win situation.
There has to be.
And
like restorers have to be able to show up with something like Albi Pay and provide that access.
I mean,
to capital.
Susie buys, purple mattresses for $5,000 on a firm with 0% down and 0% interest.
That's what they're used to.
They're walking out with Beamers off the lots, or not Beamers, but Kias or whatever, right? So I mean, the consumer has the purchasing power. I get it. We want to protect the consumer, but they also have skin in the game, and also like it's their property that we're protecting, and their property is their largest asset that's appreciating every single year. It's their investment.
I agree,
right?
But when we say like they're bad salespeople, it doesn't ring true for me. Like it stings because I feel it's not necessarily about that individual that's attempting to sell to that policyholder and like their inability or ability to do that. I think it's more about the fact that the marketplace as a whole, they can get somebody else to show up that will make those promises, right?
Yep.
And this is where we got to say fractured no more. Like restorers have to band together and just like, let's do what's legal. Let's stop eating deductibles. Like that's legally a bad idea. The laws vary state to state, but there's a lot of states where that is like just grotesquely illegal. We shouldn't eat the deductible. And we also... And that's not exactly what we're talking about, but I'm just saying on the far side of the spectrum, like let's at least all agree we're never going to eat a deductible.
1,000%.
That should happen.
But that's a utopic society. Like that's a utopic environment that's really hard to achieve. For the listeners listening here, it's like, okay, you could either blame it on the external or take it internal. And I would still say become world-class at selling, because here's the thing. Aren't there shady car dealerships out there?
Of course.
That do all kinds of shady stuff and sell lemons and sell bad cars and stuff like that?
Right. Good
Aren't
point.
there consumers that completely avoid those?
Right.
So like if we can be of service and provide the value and have a differentiator and show that we're different and also polish up our sales skills. There's zero sales training. There's consultants out there in the restoration industry that teach you how to go farm leads, which is awesome. Like go to agents, plumbers, property managers.
True.
There is zero professional sales training, meaning in-home sales training in the restoration industry.
I don't think that's true.
Who does that?
There's only one that comes to mind though.
Okay. There's one then
so
that came to your mind.
Yeah. So your point still lands.
Okay.
But I think Floodlight does a good job of teaching restorers, like you said, to go sell to agents.
Perfect.
Right? They get that part right. But they also provide guidance for how on the ground you're going to communicate to a policyholder and lock down that contract and lock down the deductible or down payment.
Well,
but outside of them, I don't know that anybody else is doing that correctly.
Okay. So thanks for correcting me. But again, it's very few. There's not that much, right? Floodlight can't service the entire industry, right? And you go to other industries, right? There's Sandler. There's all kinds of other stuff, methodologies, right? You go to a basement waterproofing company, like They're constantly training their in-home sales reps on how to identify problems, solve problems. There's a whole process and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think, how do we empower restorers to know their worth? How do we, and I think we're doing that right now. I think our audience members are going to listen right now to this and be like, maybe I can go in and take the deductible up front. Maybe I can go and explore different creative payment methods. I mean, even now you could hodgepodge, like there's like Wise Tack and Green Sky and all kinds of financing things out there. They're not built for restoration and the fintech ecosystem isn't there yet. But like, if you're a creative restorer, there you go. And imagine that. Hey, Miss Jones, like, no, I'm not going to cover your deductible. No, I'm not going to. Exactly, because it's illegal. No, I'm not going to wait for insurance and de-risk you that way. I'm a world-class restoration contractor, but here's what I'll do. I'll be able to get in tonight and save your hardwood floors. I saved your cat who was drowning in the basement. Literally has happened to me in the past, right? I am honest, ethical. These are our core values. This is how we show up as a company, right? And yeah, I'll finance this thing for you at 0% interest. So that way you can, refinance some other bad debt. And that's what I could do for you. And if you could provide the value to the consumer, not all consumers, you're still going to lose some, but you basically narrow yourself down. And it's fine. Let the green trucks and the yellow trucks or whatever do their little specials and stuff like that. And I think it's normal for the market to have some sort of segregation, like premium restorers, right? Middle of the tier restorers, the cheap restorers, right? Just like we have,
for everything else.
Exactly. Just like you have Walmart and Costco and Sam's Club and then whatever bougie Walmart would be. I don't know, because I don't really shop at bougie stores, but yeah.
Well, those market dynamics is like why the brands that I've fired up have always maintained a private client bias, right? Yeah. Because I wanted to work for consumers that were discerning, appreciated the difference, and were willing to pay for it. But I don't think that a lot of restorers are thinking about, I think they commoditize like their function, unfortunately. But I also empathize with like how difficult it is. You and I were starting this cast talking about founders needing to be able to look up, right? Like stop, panic and profit are mutually exclusive. If you're working in a panic, you're not going to find profit. Then think about the margin problem we're talking about. It's very difficult to attract and retain top tier talent in this industry if we are not afforded adequate margins as restorers. Again, empathy. I mean, I've got some amazing people working for me that I know in my heart need to be making more money. The business just isn't affording it. And it's not because I'm waiting to eat last as a founder, right? I'm distribution only. Like you guys just figure out if there's any leftovers, right? Leftovers are delicious, but you got to be patient. But even still, I'm just not sure that there's the margin available in your average day-to-day restoration job that affords the ability for founders to attract and retain top-tier talent that would be capable to sell at the levels you're describing. How do you solve that problem?
I mean, the way I would view it is back to, and it still won't solve it in the long run because carriers are still not making money. But let's put the carriers need to make money aside for a sec and say, okay, we have these ISO policies, right? And it's like, we got to pay cost incurred. Well, all right, I as a contractor need to charge per this price list to be able to hire world-class people. I only work in world-class homes or whatever, right? I segment my market in a specific way, and I sell those individuals. They incur that cost, and then they figure it out. And some or all of it will be covered by insurance, and that's a problem between them and the insurance company. And I need to justify in the sales process why I charge X, Y, Z, and say, hey, I provide this value, and the consumer needs to perceive that value, right?
But then who's the consumer? So let's just say you're offering world-class service for a moment, and then you're coming to market with your own custom price list, because you seem to infer that.
Yeah.
Is the carrier on the hook to pay for your interest as a founder in maintaining a profit margin of, say, net 20% profit? Would that be reasonable and customary? How does one make that judgment? And when you deviate from the price list, what responsibility does the carrier have to indemnify you of those costs when there are established price lists?
Well, the carrier has no responsibility to me as a contractor.
Yeah.
The carrier has to the policyholder.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm going to ask you, like, would you, if you had to pay an extra 10 grand or 15 or 20 to get a world-class restoration contractor to work at your house and take care of your, personal belongings and stuff like that versus getting a crappy one for free, like what would you pick?
Me personally?
Yeah. You would do it yourself. But
no, I don't think that's true. I really wouldn't.
Kind of thing,
no, I've had several
I saw
losses.
that Facebook video, by the
way.
I
have
with your garbage disposal.
Yeah, that's right. I was getting busy. That was just to prove that I still got it. I like to fix things every once in a while. They say if you don't use it, you lose it. I would be, I would bias the high end restorer, but I think that's probably like all things in my life. I don't waste my time buying the cheapest product.
There you go.
It's like good, cheap, fast.
Yeah.
Pick two at best. Often it's only one.
So here's the deal. If you're a restorer that wants to hire world-class talent and wants to have their own prices, you got to go find a customer. At the end of the day, the customer is the policyholder, right? That values that.
But they have to pay the bill, and then we get to
they pay the bill
exactly,
and then they could take care of if they want to if they're getting screwed by their insurance company for their policy agreement or whatever. That's a them problem, and that's the magic that happens. And I think that's the separation that I would actually encourage in the industry. Like, let's have we need different types
because
of restorers,
they set the market up here.
Yeah.
Right?
We need different types of restorers, period, full stop. We need let's hack things up and quickly get things going or whatever. Right. And this person, just needs a place to live that is clean or whatever. And then we need high end, solve these problems.
That's right. That's a good point.
And on both the consumer side and on the commercial side, there's different lacks of urgency. I mean, I don't want to discriminate, but let's just say it's a restaurant that generates, I don't know, $1,000 of profit every single day versus a restaurant that generates $100,000 of profit every single day. And they both have the same exact loss, right? One of them is going to have a higher urgency for a specific type of restorer that could maybe use specific type of technology or whatever to deliver that world-class result versus somebody else. So I think it's up to the market to decide. But what I would strongly encourage to restorers is just like software businesses, like for example, Albi came in and we're the most expensive software solution for certain restorers in the market. I mean, heck,
really, is that true?
Yeah. Well, depends on which level, but yeah. I mean,
price is only an issue in the absence of value. So good for you guys.
So, but we also deliver the value, right? Yeah. And people see that, right? And Service Titan for plumbers is double the price of Albi, right? Huh. So it's like, you get the prices all over the place. You get what you pay for. We have restorers that are locked into franchise deals, right? That are forced to use one software, and then they'll pay for that software and pay Albi. So technically they're paying triple the cost, right? Because of the value, right? Let the market decide. But even as Albi, we have to decide and be okay with the fact that some restorers are super price sensitive because they're probably doing some sort of work where their margins are super squeezed and not have enough revenue to be able to afford it, and that's okay. So flip side, restorers should also decide, hey, what kind of work do we want to do, right? Do we want to offer 15% plumbing referrals and be the cool kids on the block paying plumbers,
cool kids
$2,000 or whatever, to whoever, right? Do we want to do that?
Not cool in my book. I think that was a really toxic motion that happened 15 years ago.
It still happens.
It does.
And there's world-class private equity.
But you know what that does? It gives the carrier the impression that there is 15% net profits just to distribute. And it's not true. And what happens to all those folks that are giving 10 and 15% to plumbers? Well, what happens 5 years later?
Yeah, but here's the deal. Here's the reality. I see how you can get inflamed by that, but we don't pay for referrals, and our customer acquisition costs 14% by paying route marketers to go build relationships with insurance agents and stuff like that. So I think if you're an insurance carrier saying, oh, wow, they have so much money, blah, blah, blah. No, not the case. And actually in SaaS, 14-month CAC payback is normal. Meaning if a contractor pays you $14,000 in a year, you will pay you'll pay $16,000 to acquire that one specific customer. And that's not unreasonable in many other industries too, by the way. So I don't think we should be inflamed by 10 to 15% customer acquisition cost. I think that's actually customary.
The problem,
in a lot of
why was I inflamed by that? I mean, it's me founding a private client-centric moving company that operates in California and resisting the temptation to pay a VIG, a bird dog, a finder's fee. Yeah. And others are willing to do that. And I'm looking at my P&L and I'm not seeing 10% net profits. Yeah. And if I'm paying somebody on the bottom line of 10%, then It's a subscription to doing a stupidthingsfaster.com.
Exactly.
So, all right, that's the worst kind of SaaS, right?
Yeah.
So that's where that's coming
100%.
from. I just know it's not there. And I've also seen people I really care about and were good ethical operators go out of business every year.
100%.
And I think a lot of those folks were the ones that were paying a big referral fees.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that and you're not keeping an eye on your books.
That's the problem. When you don't know your customer acquisition costs and you don't know your return on investment and you're just randomly spending money and you don't know the fact that, hey, there's a difference between accrual and cash, for example. And just because I made 20% accrual and cash was negative 20%, like what's the difference? And I've seen sophisticated restorers not know their numbers.
Is there an accounting component to Albi that helps solve that problem?
Yes and no. I mean, we do have a tracking component to be able to track how much your marketing expenses were versus what you got.
So at the gross profit level.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. But
that helps.
Net-wise, you'll use QuickBooks and stuff
right.
like that.
That makes sense.
But anyway, so back to solving the problem and just kind of put a pin in it. Like if we give them a permission to be Walmart or Aldi or Whole Foods or Costco, and we allow them to pick two, we give them the permission to say, hey, man, there's nothing deep. Like
who is allowing in this case? Who's us? Us? Like Whatley? Duda? We're allowing?
You know what's crazy? Like sometimes restorers just need to be given the permission. I invested in this one company and they're like, oh, we can spend money on online marketing. I'm like, yeah. Like owners a lot of times just don't give themselves permission because there's that little roommate that they have in their head that just won't stop fucking talking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
well, that's the scars of not being able to make payroll or sweating bullets.
So what we're saying is, hey, there's a better way. So that's my call to action to everybody, watching is like, hey, give yourself permission to maybe think about the business a little bit differently. Give yourself permission to be a little different because it's the people that are different that typically innovate within spaces, right? And cause change and identify where you want to identify as. You could be dirt cheap, go directly to the carriers and pound, or you can be a premium restorer, that whatever, but just make sure that your actual service fits that value prop because you can't be showing up in painted pants and beat up trucks and not have all the proper meticulousness and say you're a Whole Foods, but you're actually kind of like a Tesla. Like my Tesla looks super pretty, but it's falling apart kind of thing. But as long as you do that, pick your game and experiment with different things. But yes, de-risk your projects. Find ways to take the cash quicker up front. And sure, there are limitations because in California, you can't take more than 1,000 or 10%. Great. Get a credit card on file. Charge the deductible 3 days in.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the average deductible is $2,000 to $3,000. Yeah. The average job is $10,000. Your average cost of goods sold, your direct job costs, are actually magically right around $2,000 to $3,000. So imagine if you could just take that money in, how much it will alleviate the burden of you getting paid because you got your money right then. Your people are paid. Now you're just gambling your profit. Right.
Yeah. You want to get that 66% because that allows you to perform the work.
Yeah. And then find creative solutions to offer a financing product to your consumer so they could incur the cost and also maybe there's other benefits and such. And the last thing is, what if there was a way on this subcontractor markup problem to pay out subcontractors creatively, to legally, ethically distribute the funds, kind of like how a Home Depot or a John Don distributes back. Like I go buy, dehumidifiers and I get John Don little cash coupon cards and stuff like that. And my dad walks around in his truck with those little Home Depot gift cards, and they're worth quite a bit. So
there's a hack for this, dude.
Okay, what's the hack?
Okay, you have to look at the manufacturing industry. This notion is 70 years old, but they've got terms like 10, 15, net 60, and what that implies is there's a document on file, and you add it to your perm file, your permanent file in accounting. That states the vendor relationship between, that manufacturer is procuring that goods and that supplier. If that those in procurement pay that bill for that supplier within 15 days, they can do so with a 10% discount because suppliers are hungry for that capital, right?
Yeah.
And otherwise, it would be due at net 60 within 60 days, right? And so borrowing from that precedent, when you onboard your subs, and I think there could be work done around there to help restorers evolve and grow up. And I think Albi's marching in that direction. But you could establish just a couple paragraphs that say, hey, if I pay you as a subcontractor and I pay you within 15 days, then I would need you to incur a haircut. That way you don't end up with 2 invoices, Alex. Like, that problem is solved. And now if anybody audits it, it's in the perm file. Everybody knows why they did it. And then maybe Albi could introduce a payment solution that would bifurcate that payment, and it would peel off that 10% into a marketing account. And maybe the subcontractors would be paid straight away. This is about the industry maturing. There are these problems. And there are answers, but going around and collecting 2 invoices and submitting that is just you're gonna wind up in cuffs. This is so silly. There are honest, ethical, legal ways to navigate this situation, and it's incumbent upon individuals like yourself and incumbent upon your listenership to grow up. It's time.
So you're telling me this Michael Arthur Griggs guy, had he had a contract with his vendors that had a prepayment discount or a discount for fast payment, which, by the way, we all typically, our subcontractors are hungry to get paid within 2 weeks kind of thing. Had he had this, he could have avoided 5 years of jail time. Yeah, potentially.
That's as I understand it. I don't have an ESQ behind my last name, but that's all he needed to do. And he never would have needed to call for the second invoice because it would have been implied that they had that economic relationship. And all the finances would have checked out, done deal. So I think in your spirit of like, sometimes restorers need permission, it reminded me very much of the Jeff Bezos letter to his shareholders that he published this week. Did you see it?
No, I did not.
He starts out by saying, this is the last shareholder letter I will issue as chairman, CEO of Amazon, right? He's implying his retirement this year. But he wrote all about how, as a company, and really anybody, any company, like the world will always try to drag you into being normal and being average. And it's incumbent upon Amazon to challenge the status quo and resist that temptation. And he acknowledges the fact that there's cost associated with that. There's heartache, right? You've got to go to Albi and you got to figure out how to onboard your subs in a more thoughtful way. You got to establish a perm file. But if you do the hard work, then you are creating space for you as an individual to be yourself, and that to have a good outcome. And you're creating space for you as a business owner or an entity in itself to have a good outcome. If we all just show up to market and we don't bother to differentiate ourselves, then we get totally commoditized and forever crammed down by the carrier as restorers. And so in the spirit of permission, I think that we need to invite your listenership and really just give them permission to be different. And there are great outcomes on the other side of that, provided you are willing to do the hard work.
That was a beautiful fucking plane landing, man. You landed the plane, man.
I love how you always get the plane analogies in.
Got it. Well, cool, man. Well, this has been real. Where can people find you if they're looking for you?
I mean, head to LinkedIn, type in Whatley, look for a rocket emoji. I'm a weirdo, as you know. Don't go by the first name, but fairly easy to find out on X and LinkedIn, all that good stuff. So awesome, man. Thanks for having me on, dude. This is always fun. And it's not just about us getting some ideas out there that we think can improve the marketplace, because that is, I'd like to think, the natural consequence of making the shoot. But damn it, I enjoy myself every time I get on this podcast. So thank you, Alex.
Well, thanks so much for coming. I love doing this. And I love the fun that comes after this, too.
All right, let's get after it.
Let's go do it.
All right, buddy.